The day I closed on my dream apartment, my parents called to tell me they'd already bought me one. I'm a contracts attorney. They used my own power of attorney against me. Posted to r/just no family. I'm going to tell this story from the beginning, because if I just dropped the headline, "My parents bought me an apartment without telling me and now expect gratitude," you'd think I was leaving something out. I'm not. That is, in its entirety, what happened. But the full picture requires context, because my parents, Margaret and Gerald Holloway, are not cruel people. They are something almost harder to navigate. Deeply loving people who have never once in their 69 and 66 years of life considered that love without communication is just control with better intentions. My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old. I'm a contracts attorney at a mid-size firm in Columbus, Ohio. I say that not to brag, but because it matters later. My profession shapes how I processed what happened and how I ultimately handled it. I am methodical by nature and by training. I do not make decisions without reading the fine print. I do not sign things I haven't reviewed. I do not, as a rule, acquire real estate impulsively. My parents do. Let me tell you about Margaret and Gerald Holloway. They grew up working class in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, married young, worked hard, and by their mid-40s had built genuine financial stability through a combination of Gerald's plumbing business and Margaret's 20 years as an office manager at a dental practice. They own their home outright. They have retirement savings. They are, by any reasonable measure, comfortable. They are also of the firm generational belief that financial gifts are the highest expression of love, that property ownership is the ultimate security, and that asking permission before doing something nice for your child is a sign of weakness. "We just wanted to help," is the sentence that has punctuated my entire adult life. It was said when they co-signed a car loan I didn't need in my mid-20s without telling me until the paperwork was already in my name. It was said when my mother called my then-boyfriend to ask about his intentions, without mentioning it to me first. It was said, last Thanksgiving, when my father told my entire extended family that I was thinking about buying a place. A private conversation I'd shared with him in confidence, now broadcast over mashed potatoes to 14 relatives with opinions. I love my parents. I want to be clear about that. I love them with the complicated, load-bearing love of someone who knows exactly who a person is and has chosen to keep them anyway. But loving them has always required a certain amount of emotional infrastructure. Boundaries maintained not with aggression but with quiet, consistent reinforcement. Last year, I let that infrastructure lapse for about 6 weeks, and it cost me approximately $340,000. The setup, October through November. It started, as so many things do, with a casual phone call. I was in my car on a Tuesday evening in early October, driving home from a deposition that had run 3 hours long. My mother called, and I answered on Bluetooth because I was too tired to let it go to voicemail and deal with a follow-up guilt text. "We were just talking," she said, which is never how anything good begins, "about how you've been renting for so long, Dad, and I think it might be time." "I've actually been looking," I told her, because I had been. 4 months. Quietly, carefully, the way I do everything. I had a real estate agent, I had pre-approval from my credit union, and I had 3 properties I was seriously considering. I shared this with her in the warm, unguarded way you share good news with your mother. "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. What neighborhoods?" I told her. I mentioned I was particularly interested in a 2-bedroom condo in the Short North area. Walkable, good investment, close to my office. I said I was hoping to move before the new year. "Send me the listings," she said. I did not send her the listings. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I genuinely forgot. I was busy. It slipped. On November 3rd, I made an offer on a 2-bedroom condo on Hubbard Avenue. After a brief negotiation, it was accepted at $287,000. I went through inspection, financing, everything. On December 12th, I closed. I handed over my down payment, signed my mortgage documents, and received my keys. I was proud. I called my parents that evening, genuinely excited, to tell them the news. "Oh, we know," my mother said, and there was something odd in her voice, a brightness that didn't quite land right. "We've been meaning to call you about something too." My father got on the line. "Sweetheart," he said, "we bought you an apartment." I remember the exact quality of the silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that exists in the half-second before you understand something that will change the shape of your near future. My kitchen was very still. The refrigerator hummed. "You bought me a what?" "An apartment," my father repeated, with a satisfied tone of someone delivering excellent news. 2-bedroom. Clintonville area. Margaret found it, actually, about 6 weeks ago. "We've been so excited. We wanted to surprise you." "You wanted to surprise me." "We closed last week." It's in your name, Claire. Fully. We put 30% down and the mortgage is, well, it's manageable, we worked it out, around $1,400 a month. We figured with your salary. Dad. My voice came out very quiet, which is what happens to me instead of shouting. I bought an apartment. I bought an apartment. I closed on it this morning. A pause. Oh, said my mother. Here is the financial situation I woke up to on December 13th, having gone to bed the previous evening as a person with one mortgage. Apartment 1, Mine 2 BR Condo, Hubbard Avenue, Short North. Purchase price $287,000. My down payment, $57,400. My monthly mortgage, $1,612. This was planned, budgeted, and mine. Apartment 2, theirs, now Mine 2 BR Condo, North Broadway, Clintonville. Purchase price, $310,000. My parents' down payment, $93,000, their money. Monthly mortgage, approximately $1,430. Also mine. In my name. Signed by my parents, using a power of attorney that I had granted them years ago for a completely different purpose, specifically, to handle my affairs if I were ever incapacitated. They had, with genuine love and genuinely catastrophic judgment, used it to purchase real estate on my behalf. Combined monthly housing costs, over $3,000. My take-home salary, comfortable for one mortgage. Tight for two. Not impossible, but not what I had planned, not what my savings were structured for, not something I had consented to. I sat at my kitchen table, my new kitchen table, in my new apartment, and I opened a fresh document on my laptop. I typed at the top, Inventory of situation. It's what I do when things go sideways. I list the facts before I let myself feel them. The facts were not good. Update 1. December, the first conversation. I gave myself 4 days before I called my parents back. Not for dramatic effect, but because I needed to actually understand what had happened before I could talk about it without crying, and I was not going to cry during this conversation. I was going to be clear. I called them on a Sunday morning. My mother answered and immediately launched into an explanation. We just wanted to help you build equity. Property is the safest investment, you know that. And Clintonville is growing, Claire, it's really up and coming, our realtor said. Mom. Quiet voice. How did you use the power of attorney? A pause. Well, your father looked into it, and technically, I need you to get Dad on the line. When he got on, I walked them through what I had already spent 2 days researching. The POA I'd granted them was a limited, durable power of attorney executed in 2019 for a specific purpose, to manage my financial accounts if I was hospitalized or otherwise incapacitated. It was not a general POA. Its use for a real estate transaction of this nature was, at minimum, a significant overreach and potentially challengeable. Their realtor, either through negligence or willful optimism, had apparently not raised this issue. I'm not saying what you did was illegal, I said, which was careful and lawyerly and also somewhat untrue. I had some genuine questions about the legality. I'm saying it was done without my knowledge or consent, using a legal instrument that was not meant for this purpose, and it has put me in a financial position I did not choose. But, sweetheart, I have 2 mortgages, Dad. I have $3,000 a month in housing costs as of this week. I have a down payment I just made that wiped out most of my savings. And now I have a second property I didn't ask for, with a mortgage attached to it, that I am now legally responsible for. We'll help with the payments, my mother said quickly. We planned to help. You can't help me indefinitely. You're retired. And that's not the point. I paused. The point is that you made a major financial decision for me, in my name, without asking me. I'm 34 years old. I'm an attorney. I handle contracts for a living. And you did this without a single conversation. My father's voice got quiet. We just wanted to do something special. I know, I said. And I did know. That was the hardest part. I know you did. But wanting to do something nice doesn't make the consequences go away. We ended the call without resolution. My mother was crying softly. My father was using his wounded silence, which I had been navigating since childhood. I sat in my new apartment, in my new life that had just become significantly more complicated, and I started making a list of options. Update 2. January, the audit. I spent January doing what I do professionally. I gathered information before taking action. I pulled every document connected to the Clintonville property. The deed, the mortgage paperwork, the purchase and sale agreement, the closing disclosure. I called the title company. I had a long, careful conversation with a real estate attorney colleague of mine named Diane, who owed me a favor and who spent 40 minutes on the phone with me going through the POA question. Diane's conclusion: the use of the POA was legally murky. It was possibly voidable, not automatically void. Challenging it would require litigation, would be expensive, would take months, and, here's the part one kept coming back to, would be a lawsuit against my own parents. The property was already recorded in my name. The mortgage was already originated. The cleanest path forward was not legal challenge but strategic management. So I built a spreadsheet. Option A: keep both properties, rent out Clintonville. Rental income in that neighborhood ran approximately $1,500 to $1,700 a month. That would offset most of the mortgage. I'd be a landlord, which I hadn't wanted to be, but it was financially survivable. Option B: sell Clintonville. This was complicated by the fact that my parents had put $93,000 of their own money into the down payment. If I sold, the net proceeds after paying off the mortgage would partly represent a return of their investment. This required a direct, documented conversation about what they expected from that money. Option C: transfer the property back to my parents, release myself from the mortgage. Theoretically possible, but the mortgage lender would need to approve a release of liability, which they almost certainly wouldn't do without a refinance, and my parents were retired and would struggle to qualify. Option D: do nothing immediately. Continue paying, build a plan, and address the relationship separately from the financial reality. I chose a modified version of A and B: rent out Clintonville on a 12-month lease while simultaneously having a formal, documented conversation with my parents about the financial arrangement and what each party expected. But first, I needed to have the conversation I had been putting off, the real one, not the one about legal instruments and monthly payments, but the one about what this pattern had cost me over the years and what it needed to stop costing me going forward. I invited my parents to Columbus for a weekend in late January. My mother made lasagna when she arrived, which is her emotional vocabulary for I know things are tense and I want them not to be. I accepted the lasagna. I let us have dinner together like people who loved each other, which we were, even now. On Saturday morning, I sat them down at my dining room table, the same table where I'd made my inventory list 6 weeks earlier, and I placed 3 documents in front of them. The first was a 1-page summary of the financial situation, both mortgages, my current savings balance, my monthly income and expenses. Laid out plainly, in columns, the way a closing disclosure is laid out. My father put on his reading glasses. The second was a short letter I had written. Not a legal document, just a letter. It described, in clear and measured language, what the pattern of undiscussed decisions had felt like across my adult life, and specifically what this one had cost me financially and emotionally. I had revised it 4 times to remove anything that sounded accusatory, anything that was about anger rather than information. What remained was honest and, I thought, fair. The third was a proposed written agreement. It wasn't a contract, exactly, I wasn't going to sue my parents. But it documented what I called a shared understanding, that my parents' $93,000 down payment on the Clintonville property constituted either a gift or a loan, and that we needed to decide which, in writing, so that all 3 of us understood what was expected. If it was a gift, I needed them to say so clearly and sign a gift letter, which would have tax implications I'd help them navigate. If it was a loan, I needed a repayment schedule. My father read all 3 documents. My mother got to the letter and her eyes filled. "I didn't know you felt this way," she said. "I've tried to tell you before," I said. "Not with a letter. But I've tried." My father folded his reading glasses. "We thought we were helping." "I know, Dad. The POA. I'm not bringing lawyers into this," I said. "I don't want that. But I need you to understand that what you did had real consequences, and I need us to figure out the money piece in a way that's clear for everyone." There was a long quiet. My father said, "It's a gift. Whatever comes of the property, it's a gift. We don't want it back." I said, "I need that in writing. For both of our protection." He looked at me for a moment with an expression I recognized. That complicated look parents get when they realize their child has become someone competent enough to outmaneuver them gently. "All right," he said. Update 3. February through April, the execution. I found a tenant for the Clintonville apartment in February. Her name was Priya. She was a graduate student in nursing. She was meticulous about her application materials and had an excellent rental history. I had Diane review the lease. First month's rent plus security deposit covered almost exactly 1 month of mortgage and maintenance costs. With the $1,600 monthly rent going forward, I was cash flow neutral on the property. Not making money, but not bleeding. I also had a gift letter drafted, reviewed by a tax attorney, and signed by both of my parents in early February. It was clean and straightforward, the $93,000 down payment was documented as a gift, not a loan. This had tax implications for them under the annual gift exclusion rules, which I walked them through with patience and without condescension, which cost me something emotionally but which I considered necessary. In March, something shifted. My parents, Gerald in particular, started asking questions about Priya. Normal questions at first. Was she taking care of the place? Was she paying on time? And so on. Then, in a phone call in late March, my father mentioned that a friend of his from church was looking for a place, and that it might be nice to offer him the apartment when Priya's lease ended. I sat with this for 3 days. Then I called my father. "Dad," I said, "I need to say something, and I need you to really hear it." "Okay. The Clintonville apartment is mine. I didn't choose to have it, but I have it. I manage it. I make the decisions about it. I'm grateful that you and Mom have accepted that. But I need you to understand that suggestions about what to do with it, who to rent to, when to sell, what to change, are not something I'm going to be able to act on. Not because I don't value your input, but because this has to be mine to manage. That's the only way this situation works." A pause. "Fair enough," my father said. And that, to his credit, was that. He didn't bring it up again. I want to pause here and say something about my mother, because this story is not only about my father's initiative. My mother's role was different. She was the one who found the listing, who got excited, who convinced my father this was a good idea. And in the months following December, she had been quieter than usual, which for Margaret Holloway is practically a medical event. In April, she called me on a Wednesday evening, and I could tell immediately that she had been preparing what she wanted to say. "I've been talking to someone," she said. "A therapist. Just someone to talk to. I did not expect this. She helped me understand something," my mother continued. "That sometimes when you do things for people without asking, it's because you're afraid that if you ask, they'll say no. And then you have to feel the feeling of not being needed." I sat very still. "I think that's what happened," she said. "I think I was so afraid you were doing fine without us that I wanted to insert myself. Make myself necessary." "Mom," I said, and my voice came out softer than I intended. "I know it doesn't fix the mortgage." "No," I said. "It doesn't. But it means a lot. It genuinely does." We talked for an hour and a half. It was the longest real conversation we had had in years, maybe ever. Update 4. May through July. The complications. Nothing, of course, proceeds cleanly. In May, Priya informed me that her program was shortening and she would need to break the lease in August, 2 months early. She was apologetic, offered to pay the early termination fee as written in the lease, and was altogether gracious about it. I accepted the fee, thanked her for being a good tenant, and updated my spreadsheet. 2 months gap in rental income. Fine. I had the emergency fund for it. What I hadn't planned for was the inspection I had conducted on the Clintonville property in June, a routine one I'd scheduled because I was a first-time landlord being careful, which revealed a water heater that the inspector considered to be at end of life and a bathroom exhaust fan that had never been properly vented and had been pushing moisture into the wall cavity for an unknown period of time. Possible mold remediation. Possible wall repair. Estimated cost, $4,200 on the low end. I called my parents. Not to ask for money, I want to be precise about that. I called them because they had been the ones to inspect and purchase this property, and I had some questions about the inspection report they had received at closing. My father found it after some searching. He emailed me a scan. The water heater was flagged. "Did you read the inspection report before closing?" I asked. A pause. "We went over it with the realtor." "Dad, the water heater was flagged in the original inspection report." A longer pause. "The realtor said it was." I know what the realtor probably said. I'm not angry. And I wasn't, really. I was tired, in the way that requires careful, measured response rather than an emotional one. I need to know whether there was any negotiation for a credit or price reduction based on this item. There wasn't. Their realtor had recommended accepting the property as is, at full price, with no credit for the flagged items. I called Diane. Diane called a real estate claims specialist she knew. I wrote a carefully worded letter to my parents' real estate agent's brokerage, noting that a material defect identified in the pre-purchase inspection had not been addressed in the negotiation, and requesting a conversation about their agent's professional obligations. I was polite. I was specific. I cited the relevant sections of the Ohio Real Estate Licensing Standards. I asked for a response within 14 business days. They responded in 9. Their errors and omissions insurance carrier became involved. After 2 months of back-and-forth correspondence, none of which involved a courtroom, all of which involved my very careful, documented letters, I received a settlement offer of $6,500 to resolve the matter and sign a release. The actual repair costs came in at $3,800. Net result, $2,700 in my pocket, a repaired water heater, and a properly vented bathroom exhaust fan. I told my father about this outcome on a phone call in late July. There was a silence on his end. "You got them to pay for it," he said. "Their agent made a professional error. I documented it and asked them to address it." "You didn't yell at anyone." "I never yell at anyone, Dad." Another pause. Then, with something that sounded almost like wonder, "You're really good at this." "It's literally my job." Update 5. August through October, the resolution. By August, the Clintonville apartment was vacant, clean, and relisted. I had taken the 2 months of vacancy not as a loss but as an opportunity. I repainted the main room, replaced the bathroom fixtures, installed a smart thermostat, and took new listing photos. I raised the asking rent by $150. A young couple named Derek and Allison, he was a teacher, she was in marketing, signed a 14-month lease in September. They were exactly the kind of tenants a landlord hopes for: employed, communicative, had renter's insurance before I even asked. They moved in on October 1st. My monthly cash flow on the Clintonville property was now slightly positive, rental income exceeding mortgage, insurance, and maintenance reserve by approximately $140 a month. That's not wealth. But it's not a wound anymore. More importantly, something else had shifted. My parents came to visit in late September. My mother brought lasagna again, but this time she also brought a very small, hand-painted picture frame she'd made in a ceramics class she'd started in the spring. Her therapist had apparently suggested finding a creative outlet, and Margaret Holloway had chosen to become, in her late 60s, a ceramicist. The frame held a photo of me at my Hubbard Avenue closing, holding my keys, grinning in a way that I hadn't noticed at the time because I had been too busy grinning. "I found it on your Instagram," she said, slightly sheepishly. "I hope that's okay." "It's okay, Mom." We had dinner. My father, over pasta, asked carefully, not told, not assumed, whether I had any thoughts about the long-term plan for the Clintonville property, whether I was thinking of it as a rental indefinitely, or whether I might eventually sell. "I'm thinking of holding it for now," I said. "The neighborhood is appreciating. In 5 years, maybe 7, it might make sense to sell." "That's smart," he said. Just that. No follow-up. No alternative suggestion. He passed the bread. After dinner, while my mother was washing dishes, and she washes dishes the way she does everything, with total absorption, my father and I sat on my small balcony with coffee. It was a cool September evening, the kind Columbus does well, and we sat quietly for a while. "I want to apologize," he said. "Properly, Dad." "No, let me." He set his coffee down. "I know we explained ourselves. I know your mother has been working on the understanding part with her therapist. And I've been thinking about it too, on my own. What I came up with was, we spent so long building something so that we could give it to you, and we got so focused on the giving that we forgot to ask if you wanted it. We forgot that you had your own version of things." I didn't say anything. The city made its quiet sounds. "Your mother found that apartment," he said. "She found it and she was so excited, and she called me and said, 'Gerald, this is the one, this is what Claire needs,' and I believed her. Because she loves you so much. We both do. And I didn't stop to think that love isn't the same as permission." "No," I said. "It's not. I'm sorry, Claire." I looked at my father, at the 69-year-old man who had built a business with his hands, who had driven me to every school event, who had spent 40 years providing so completely for his family that providing had become the only love language he knew, and I felt the complicated, load-bearing thing shift slightly. Not resolve entirely, but shift. "I know you are," I said. "And I know you meant well. Both of you. That's not enough, though." "No," I agreed. "It's not enough. But it's a real start. Where things stand now. It is October. Nearly 11 months since the phone call that began this. Here is what is true. I own 2 apartments. One I chose and one I didn't. Both are functioning. The one I chose I live in happily. The one I didn't, I have made my own through the work of understanding it, managing it, and refusing to let it be a source of ongoing resentment. My parents have not made any major unilateral decisions about my life since December. This is the longest such stretch in my adult memory. My mother continues to see her therapist. My father has started asking questions where he used to offer declarations. It is not a total transformation. It is a real one. The power of attorney document that was used to purchase the Clintonville property has been revoked. I did this quietly, properly, in January, and I told my parents I was doing it and why. My father said, "That makes sense." My mother cried a little and then said, "Okay. I have a new, precisely scoped POA with a different trusted person designated. My parents know this and have accepted it. Financially, I'm tighter than I planned to be at 34. The dual mortgage situation is real and will be for some years. But I've restructured my savings contributions, I have a tenant, I have a settlement check in my history, and I have the Clintonville property appreciating quietly in a neighborhood that is, it turns out, genuinely up and coming. If you've read this far and you're wondering what the point is, what the strategic revenge is, what the satisfying downfall looks like, I want to offer you a different frame. My parents didn't face consequences in the dramatic sense. They didn't lose money. They didn't lose me. Nothing collapsed. No one was humiliated. What happened instead is that I stopped waiting for my parents to change before I changed how I responded to them. I built the structure, the letter, the documented gift agreement, the revoked POA, the careful, lawyerly correspondence that recovered repair costs, not to punish them but to reorient the relationship. To make clear, through action rather than argument, that I was a full adult whose consent and input were not optional extras. The change in my parents is real, but it is not the point. The point is that I stopped being someone things happened to. I became someone who read the documents, built the spreadsheet, and wrote the letter. I am still more financially stretched than I planned. But I am no longer confused about who manages my life. That, it turns out, is the most satisfying ending I know how to write. ETA, yes, I'm keeping both apartments. No, I'm not resentful of my parents. Complicated, yes. Resentful, no. Yes, gift taxes were handled. No, I won't name the brokerage. Yes, Mom's ceramics are actually pretty good. Editing to add because the comments are asking. No, my parents did not mean to cause harm. That's the whole thing. That's the entire story. Good intentions and real consequences coexist constantly. The goal was never to make them villains. It was to make sure I was never again a passenger in my own life.